So, Carol, it's a great honor to be talking with you. I've been very interested in Kenya for a long time, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your views. Let me ask a question about the news first. Of course, the big news story that most of us have heard about from Kenya in the past few weeks is, very sadly, the story of the terrorist attack in Westgate Mall. And I'd like to know your view as a Kenyan. How do you think that's going to affect economic growth over the next few years? Do you think that will have some kind of serious impact on Kenya's image, or do you think this is just another incident that Kenya ought to be able to weather, take in its stride?
Thank you very much. I'm so glad we could have this discussion this afternoon. The Westgate Mall was a very vibrant place for not just Kenyans, but even foreigners. It was a place everyone went to for a cup of coffee. It was more of a hangout mall than a shopping mall. Yes, it had a lot of shops, but in terms of impact to the economy and our assessment so far, it doesn't look like it will have a major impact in terms of loss. What we are careful is to ensure that the perception does not cause the negative impact. And so that is what we're discussing a lot and saying, yes, this did happen and it's one section, but terrorist attacks are happening all over in many countries, and the impact on the economy is not that big. And so we shouldn't be seeing that happening in Kenya right now. But what we're trying to do is managing perceptions and also encouraging and saying there are many parts especially for the tourism sector, because tourism is a different kind of investment. It's a leisure investment. So I'll only go where I feel safe. And so we're really talking about and saying there's so many other parts of Kenya to go to except Westgate Mall. But at the same time, we're not taking chances. We're working very closely. Private sector and government are working very closely in terms of security measures and especially enhancing our border security so that we do not have a repeat of a Westgate Mall or a worse situation.
Yeah, very good answer. And sort of along the same lines, one of the things that fascinates me about Kenya is the way that the political system seems to be so dysfunctional in many ways, and yet economically, the country remains quite a powerhouse within its region. It's such a fascinating contradiction to those of us who aren't that familiar with the area. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yes, that's true. That's how it looks. But I think what really keeps Kenya going is because the economy is private sector led. And so despite the noise, the political noises, the private sector keeps working because they know that a lot of it is noise. It's not there's not much impact on the ground. So you will see a lot of politicians talking and fighting on the media, but they really don't do that. That causes any impact. And so private sector has learned, and even foreign private sector learns very fast that you keep moving despite the noise. And so that has not had any major impact on the economy. And that's why the economy keeps growing despite all the noise.
That's fascinating. That makes a lot of sense. What do you think what are the sectors that have the best prospects for growth in Kenya in the next few years? Where do you see the most growth coming from?
Tourism. Tourism remains a major sector. We've hardly touched our tourism sector. Telecommunications. Nairobi is really the hub of East Africa in terms of telecommunication. Just telecommunication and transport. When you look at Africa in terms of connectivity of airlines, Kenya Airways has the most connectivity to African countries, and to other countries, and so that really makes Nairobi and Kenya a hub in terms of that, and so that will continue to grow. And then financial services, and that's leading to a lot of multinationals that are setting base in Africa to consider Kenya as their base, their regional office, as to be able to reach the rest of Africa. It's the gateway to East Africa for a long time. Then it became the gateway to East Africa and Central Africa. But now we're seeing that it's seemingly because of its geographical location, the gateway to Africa. It's very centrally located. And so a lot of companies before would use South Africa, but South Africa is really at the bottom. And the size of Africa is 3 times the size of United States map. So Kenya is becoming a very attractive destination because of that. Then the other area, agriculture. Agro-business, agro-industry it's growing rapidly. Right now, the government has embarked on a 1 million irrigation scheme And so that's really going to grow agriculture in terms of that. But there's a new sector that is deemed to grow the economy much more than what we've seen. We've relied more on the what we'd call the non-natural resource economy, and we're second to Egypt, and maybe first to Egypt now, considering what's happening in Egypt, of the number one non-natural resource economy in Africa, but fifth as in terms of when you consider all the other economies. But now we've just discovered oil and gas and all the other minerals. And so this, if well harnessed, and we're working very closely with government on the policies around the minerals, should see the country continue to grow at a faster pace than before.
Wow, fascinating. I'm glad I asked about that. Explain to me, please, you mentioned the geographical advantages of Kenya, but what other factors contribute to its success as a financial hub? Because usually if you want to be a successful financial hub, you need some kind of secure regulatory framework. And I wonder if that's so stable in Kenya, and perhaps there are other circumstances.
Yeah,
that
that's
affect
true. That's true. The regulatory framework is very stable, and it's very vibrant in the sense that it's very private sector friendly. And so, for a country as small as Kenya, we have 45 banks, commercial banks. And that just really says why it's become such an important place. And these are not just local banks; they're both local and foreign banks, and not foreign banks from one section. It's from the U.S., from Europe, from Asia, from the Middle East. All types of banks seem to really settle there, and it's just because of the regulatory framework, but also because of the access of businesses, because of other businesses setting foot in the country. Then there's a need. But secondly, what has grown the financial services is the innovations in the IT sector. So there are a lot of innovations that we see, a lot of development applications that the young people are developing that the financial sector depends on, and that has really grown the banking industry and the financial sector in general.
Fascinating. Could you give me some examples, perhaps, of some of the new Kenyan tech companies that are coming up? Tech IT companies.
Oh, IT companies. We have 7Cs, which is a multi-million Kenya shilling industry, but it's very Kenyan.
What do they do?
They're actually a lot involved in support services, but also harnessing a lot of innovations and applications that are coming out of the universities and selling that to industries. And so that has really made them grow, and they're expanding to the rest of Africa. So we're looking at them as one of the companies that may be the multinational of tomorrow. But there are many other smaller ones that are locally grown, individual and sole proprietorship, that are really becoming mega. But a lot of them is because they supply to the industries, and especially the financial sector, in terms of IT services to the different industries, IT services and applications, but also the innovation centers. So we're also having some of the largest innovation centers for IT in Kenya, like the iHub, which is actually world renowned and has really gotten a lot of world awards for just harnessing innovation for young people.
So you mentioned the universities. Do you feel that the educational system in Kenya is delivering as it should be?
There's a lot to be done, but so far so good. Right now, in terms of comparing ourselves with other African countries, the human resource in Kenya is the most advanced and so well thought of. Again, driving the reason why a lot of multinationals set their base in Kenya is because of the human resource. And that's the one thing every time I meet with businesses and ask them, why did Google choose Kenya, or Microsoft choose Kenya, or General Motors, and they say it's a human resource capital.
Fascinating. That's really interesting. One last question, a very touchy subject, but it comes up a lot. Corruption. What do you tell foreign investors when they're thinking about investing in Kenya? There is quite a bit of corruption in the economy. What do you tell them, or what kind of questions do they ask? How do businesses deal with corruption in Kenya?
True, corruption is an issue, but it's not the major issue. I think with Kenya, just as with our politics, we talk a lot about everything. And so we talk a lot about corruption, that you'd almost think corruption is in every door you knock. But that's not true. It's not in everywhere, but it's still a problem that is being dealt with. And one of the things that the government is doing to really handle corruption, especially because a lot of the corruption is in the government offices, is automating the services. And so there's now a big focus on e-government, and that will reduce a lot of corruption. Already some of the areas that had high corruption, like the company registry, has been already automated. The land registries and automation, the port services are going through automation. And so that will continue to reduce that. So a lot of it, there's a lot of perception about high corruption than the reality of it. And also what I tell companies that are setting base in Kenya, I say, unless you're doing business with government, the chances of you interacting with corruption is not likely. So there is corruption in the police, but how often do you meet with the police? So it's not as bad as it sounds.
Fascinating. Very, very interesting. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.